I know I'm a few weeks. I'm a bit behind. I'm getting caught up. Luckily, the Marshall King is apparently off this week, so it's a great time for me to get caught up on that for reviews. But as I've mentioned, the two series for like the newer generations that I have the most interest in, from Jump, it is Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, and from Shonen it was Shonen Magazine. They moved it over to bi-weekly, the digital only with Galaxis, which personally I wish that we would have more bi-weekly, just because like if somebody can do it weekly, cool. If they think it would be better for the manga and for like the readers and whatnot to go bi-weekly, I would personally appreciate it. It's because I think it ends up like it's sort of like say like 100 Years Quest. It's done so much at making sure we don't get a lot of bloat content chapters where it's like, man, I have 14 pages but I need 16, and they just figure out how to create enough panels or pages just to get it right up to where you need to. Or obviously in cases where manga, because their health can't keep up. But we and especially with Shonen Jump, because man, I saw some of the leaks they're talking about with like Toriyama. I was like, holy shit. But anyway, as it were, Kyoshi, the last couple chapters, I gotta figure out my best spots to keep this from unfocusing. Luckily, it's not as important when it's just at me. But the last couple chapters, we had Kyoshi against Hydraco. I think that fight, it was a good fight in reality when you look at a lot of the different spots right now for the Demon Lords, because with the first two that we saw with Kiyoshi, he just ran through Mado and Sada. We had like equivalents with like Memi, and he didn't really fight Memi in full because it was more about like this, Demon Lord in power, but it like Memi in a lot of ways, it just seems to be like, like a big wolf, like a big dog. So it just, he doesn't have the same level of raw intelligence, and then on top of that, it's like he, at the end of the day, he behaves more like an animal, and he, earning his trust clearly worked with Kyoshi, and then obviously intimidating him, kind of like how Sakaki did. Well, Sakaki seems to just have to go way more brutal on him from the flashback moment, but as it were, he against Hydraco, who is the 6th rank, and this is one of the reasons why I didn't really feel like Kyoshi was going to be pushed too much in this fight. I'm surprised like even busting out that bigger Pandora was required. Because with Bakuyaraku, we had Nihon and Jack Joe being able to defeat the 5th rank, and granted, you have a demon who was again 5th rank before, and then on top of that, you have their synergy involved that makes them really powerful. So you have these guys that have a natural, just one of the corners of that whole way that the demon powers through contracting within the verse works was obviously going to be way more so than you would expect for most new people, just because it's a demon of high value, and they just have known each other their whole lives pretty much. Well, in Jack Joe's relative case, and then in Nihon since he was a little kid, so it's like, okay, it makes sense that they're able to close this gap, and they were more so losing to technique and experience. But that's just going to be the thing that just divides, like, okay, well, they're very powerful, but this is the area they're lacking. And even though like in a direct power competition, it was clear that he was stronger, but Bakuyaraku just had way more general, he just was more experienced. He just was way better of a fighter. And again, somebody that was very technique based, which I think was cool with him, because we've gotten a little bit more of that of the demons in the verse since that fight. And that was again another big thing that I really wanted to get to, because the series with the Exorcist, it makes sense with like obtaining powers because they're humans baseline, but the demons are baseline demons, so it's like, okay, well, what exactly is their whole layer of powers and stuff? Because the humans get like percept power, and they have these different exorcist techniques, and you can get like crest exorcisms and gear and weapons. And with demons, I would assume stuff like weapons is going to be the same thing, where they could get like a some form of enhanced weapon that's got like demonic power into it. Maybe they're not going to be as common, but I've always like, one, I really like that we are seeing like more just like the generic energy attacks, like blast energy beam. Mukurojima in this chapter like lifted his head up and shot a beam out of his mouth. I like stuff like that because it gives the species baseline powers. And as we've been seeing, like with say Bakuraku, he had all these different arms and eyes, so he's able to just move and see at ways that a lot of people normally wouldn't with 2 arms and 2 eyes. With Hydraco, her ability just to kind of create poisons and paralysis abilities, and then like the toxin that makes you turn into a baby just reverts you into this defenseless state. And with Gorgon, we actually got to get like, she didn't have as many because it's like I would assume with like the ability to conjure poisons and whatnot, there's a lot more range. And then again with Bakuraku, I guess his was more, this is physically part of me kind of thing. Well, I guess hers is too, because she has like these eye powers where she either has one eye that can, if you fear it, can turn you into a doll, and her other one will like nightmare lock you into stuff. And the last chapter, I didn't think the last chapter was going to be like. There's one thing actually really fast I will mention, because in the last few chapters, for the most part, the content that we've been getting has been about what I would expect from a lot of this. Like the Nihon, like I mentioned, the Nihon and Jack Joe fight, getting that early was one of my biggest things that I wanted coming out of this arc, just because I wanted to see what exactly their form, like how are they going to fight? Was it going to be a weapon? I mean, they got a weapon and a form, but like, what exactly was it going to be? Because the only reference we had was High Stakes and Sakaki, where he's got a dice version. But we know now, and just further in confirmation, that once you first form that contract and he goes into your shadow, then that's the form of like what your power is going to be. Like with High Stakes, he becomes the little gambling cup thing, and dice, and then with Nihon and Jack Joe, he becomes like a shroud. I was happy that Hydrako's color palettes, I really like that she's like ghost white. I don't know, I think that it's just like, I expected her to be more like blue or something. I think the ghostly white just looks really good, because it's not like, oh yeah, she's pale, it's straight up like, whipped cream. This chick is as white as humanly possible. So I'm kind of hoping that like just she comes back, because she didn't seem like one of those characters who is just irredeemably evil. Because you're always gonna have those characters like, some of them are just like, I'm a bad guy, I fight on the bad guy side. Kind of like Bakuraku seemed a bad guy, but he was not so far like to where you could be like, oh, he's an ally now. It's not like, yeah, like last week he walked into the scene and he's got like 5 kids skewered on his weapon and they're all dead. It's like, no, there's degrees of like, clearly, especially with like Jack Joe, and then we saw with Bakuro, he still had honor, that there is, as we know, we were introduced in the series, there are good demons, but there are just way more bad demons. But even with that, there could be bad demons that end up becoming allies. Again, it's one of those things where you have a bad character who is an enemy and then becomes an ally. There always has to be a reasonable level of like, okay, I can see why characters would trust them. A good example of has is like Gajio from Fairy Tail. He was an enemy, but he wasn't like a killer. He was a thug, and he beat the shit out of people. But at the end of the day, he wasn't a murderer. He wasn't somebody that it's like, you can look and be like, yeah, this is a little rough, but it's not to where this guy is so beyond the idea of coming back that you would be able to oh yeah, let's just bring him in. I don't think that she is evil enough that, again, that it'd be like if something happened, like she's like, oh, I'm in love with Kiyoshi now, like I want to be on your guys' side and fight with you guys, and something along those lines I could see happening. Because even like with her display, her character wasn't like, she didn't come off as super evil. I know like they had the Exorcist bit when they introduced her into this fight, and she's got them like hanging from the swing set, which is pretty brutal. It's a little different, I would say, like, because obviously she was gonna kill them, but she wasn't. Again, she wasn't killing people needlessly in the idea of like, oh, I just went out and picked these guys up from the store. They were exorcists that are going after her. Obviously, they're invading, so it's a little different. And also, like, we don't know her in depth, but how much of it is just like she's just doing what she's told to because she's in literally a power hierarchy system. And I would assume that if she's not, she doesn't fall in line, she's going to get killed. It would just make sense for how like the demon world structure you would expect. So if you had, say, like, had her come back and she's like, I wanted to redeem myself and earn that, undo the error of my ways, I could see maybe. That's just kind of like my takeaway for that fight, because it wasn't done in a way that was like, I figured Kiyoshi would put a little bit more effort into it, but at the same time, I'm not too surprised that he was able to get around her. I mean, she got that bite in, and it's like, if it was normally without, well, for one, I will say, I think these fodder demons, I wouldn't be surprised if like Kiyoshi, even as a baby, could one-shot them. Because it doesn't seem, because like one thing, it doesn't seem like it converts you into a baby like when you were born. It converts you into a baby from how you're at, because Kiyoshi's wearing the same clothes, he's still got his tattoos, so I would assume he still has all his crest exorcism powers, and his hair is still dyed, and we know when he was younger it was just the red, and he didn't get the black on the sides until he got a lot older. I say a lot older as if he's like in his 30s, but you know what I mean, once he became an exorcist. And then obviously Hitsugi showing up, saving him. There was a really cool moment when some fodder some fodder demon was like, "This is going to be easy," and Hitsugi's like, "This baby doesn't mean anything in terms of you guys winning." And then like, it's like, "Oh, big talk," and then he's just like, pop, kills, just completely headshots both of them relatively immediately. And I mean, that just moments like that is really cool. I like when you have fodder demons for the sake of stuff like that. I kind of want them to have a moment with some of like the top demons. Like my best idea would be like if we had a top demon that is going to be one that lives through this arc and later becomes a demon lord, or maybe climbs the ranks in their world, and that could be a character that we see the demon world from their point of view kind of scenario. But the biggest things I would say though is I really liked seeing just like random support abilities, whereas Hitsugi just goes to a nearby fountain, he makes like this big amount of water come out of it, condenses it, and turns it into holy water. And so he gives him a I wouldn't imagine like a degree of like healing. Maybe he could get healing along the way. I know like holy water and healing just kind of go hand in hand. It'd be really easy to give him that power. Plus, they don't have any healers. They need a healer, and I would kind of rather he get a healing power rather than Akari. I feel like Akari, like I like Akari's sensory ability, but like just if I'm also I've said before, I like that she is the only character right now that isn't really strong, but she is able to still do something because again, I like seeing characters over time grow. And it's like when you have a character that even though they can't fight with effectiveness, they could do whatever they can to be useful. I always like characters like that, even if it's like, yeah, in reality you can't really do too much, but one, the effort is good, and two, even just accomplishing small stuff like she did during the Bakuraku fight is always a plus to me. And it shows the potential for the character to grow without it just being like, yeah, let me just give you a power up and now you're actually going to be able to do anything. It's like, no, she's been trying. It's just when you look at everyone else's growth capabilities, she's the only one that doesn't have some form of like special thing going on. Her sensory abilities is maybe that'll be a thing, but I don't really know what that's going to really do for her. Maybe she'll be one of those characters like she just has to find the right teacher. Maybe it'll be Kyoka. I don't know. But after that point, like it's very obvious, like they're just gonna run through these low-level demons. But then Kurose Sada shows up, which is really cool because he has an ice power. And I don't know if it was just like me not thinking about like his mask, but it definitely goes into it. It looks like it's ice based. I mean, granted, we didn't see what his brother's abilities could really do. He pretty much just got off screened. Well, his fight was off screen and then Kiyoshi one shot him. So it's like, really, we didn't see what his full scale abilities would be. I don't even think there was any display of like elemental abilities in the church whatsoever during that chapter of like the aftermath. I think they just got thrown around. But yeah, this guy just is cool. I'm always a fan when characters that have an elemental power have a cool elemental theme based entrance of when they're showing up. I will say I'm hoping Kiyoshi leads this fight. Maybe they fight together for a short period and then Kiyoshi has to dip. But I don't really want Kiyoshi to be here because I think like Kiyoshi and Hitsugi combined, I think should be fine against this guy. Whereas like I would much rather see Hitsugi 1v1 this dude. I think it'd be way cooler. He's the rival. He's the only one right now that I think left has something directly to prove. Because when you look at all the characters, like I said, Akari, I don't think Akari can have like a big power level fight scene right now. I would really love if we got a low level demon where she just got to 1v1 him. And it's like, it doesn't have to be extensive. It could be in like a chapter. But, maybe when the characters are hurt and she has one of those moments where she's like, I gotta do this. But it's done in a way where it's not just like, oh, we're bringing them in and big characters and she has to run. It's like, okay, you have a character that normally the other characters would be able just to get rid of super easy, but at her level, it is a challenge. And there's always that like, what if the characters wake up and help her? What if the characters wake up and help her? But it'd be really cool if you had one of those moments where she's like, I can't think of like that. I have to be able to do this on my own. It would be awesome. I think it'd be great for a character. Like I said, I'm always a fan of when characters, you have one of those characters that doesn't get to jump up levels faster and they have to progress at a much harder rate. And then at some point she's going to hit one of those strides and like figure out what her skill is and her power that is going to go into, events in the story. I think that's going to be really cool once we get to that. Because like with Nihon and Jack Joe, you look at Kiyoshi. Kiyoshi's got a lot of untapped potential, a lot of raw potential, but he is obviously a fairly experienced. He's not as experienced as he needs to be because we literally had that going into this arc about like you haven't experienced enough as an exorcist. Same thing with Hitsugi, and then like Tsurugi, Kyoka, Sakaki. All these characters are already seasoned cross paladin rank people. I don't think there's any newer characters that we're gonna get any of these scenes with where it's gonna be like, oh, I'm in an outgunned spot. Hitsugi can do it against Kurose just because, like, rank 3 against a character who, lost to his older brother, but much weaker. It's just be like, sorry, almost. Maybe that's him getting to me. Hang on, let me clear my throat before I get in like a coughing minute. That's my body telling me not to ramble on too long. I was like, man, I want to try and get these videos to 15 so minutes each. I feel like it'll be harder with Kiyoshi just because, one, there's a lot of small stuff that happened the last couple chapters, plus I mean, like, there's a lot that happened within those that I really liked. Mukurojima, I mean, I can pretty much sum up. I mean, mostly you have him just leisurely going around kidnapping Exorcists. I really like that Sakaki and him have a past. I'm hoping we get a flashback to that, but also him questioning him on Yuta, I thought was really cool. If, like, you're the one that did this to him, right? Which, again, also sets it, it's not Demon Rank 1, whoever that guy ends up being, probably that giant hand, or Azudaroth when he comes out, is Mukurojima, which, as the scientist guy, I think that's pretty dope, just as a guy that's, the tester, the experimenter guy, and he has this human that maybe he is like, well, he was working with us and doing stuff, but I did experiment with him to a little bit without his knowledge, and did to do things. Whereas, like, you could have Yuta be like, I don't care, it made me stronger, kind of bit, because he has a moment. And this is actually pretty telling for Yuta now that I think about it in the next chapter, where Mukurojima summons Demon Lords 10 and 9, and Sakaki just grabs a cigarette, flicks it in the air, rolls a 4, gets his fan, and just blitzes past him. And this is a new one where his Tetra Speed Iron Fan just goes and one-shots both of these guys, and, exercises them super fast. And Mukurojima just seems pretty happy about it. But like the opening again to this newest chapter, because now we're in the newest chapter, you have here again, I really like the lift head energy blast. I'm a fan, especially because he turned his head around. I thought that was just a really neat little feature he can do. Again, little components to their design that play into their powers. Like, again, he's a skeleton, so he can move his head, I think is really cool, because it gives you ways to play with the demons in it gives you an ability to play with them in their design, that it's not just, oh yeah, it's a cool design. It's like, what can their design as a tell directly of their power? It's not just as like, oh, I'm a character who uses poison and I've got a bunch of purple on, that something like that. It's like, oh, well, this character, in the instance of like this chick Gorgon Man, then she has a giant snake form. She has Gorgon based like ocular abilities, like things like that. That it's just like, okay, you see a little bit of a tell. Let's see how that plays into it, because it could just be, oh yeah, I have an eye power, or I have a full giant snake form, something like that. But Yuta, like I said, Yuta being able to contend even like momentarily with Sakaki means that he is much stronger than the two demon lords that he just ran through. So I would assume that he's going to be like the actual fight for Sakaki right now. Maybe Mukurojima will be his fight a little bit later in the arc, and this is just to kind of like give somebody that takes Sakaki out for a period of time. Just because I'm very curious still about, one, Tsurugi. I don't know where Tsurugi is, but where each of their fights are going to go. Because with Kyoka, she got the 4th rank, and you have Gorgon Maid. She's Maid, Media, I don't know how her name's exactly pronounced. Gorgon is easy to pronounce, so I'll just go with Gorgon. But she's using her power, like I mentioned, she turns people into dolls with one eye that are afraid of her. And as shown, like, Kyoka wasn't afraid of her, so it doesn't work. And she's like, oh, I want to make you into doll number 1000, and let's just kind of keep going. And there's this really cool moment in the start of the chapter where she mentions that, like, 4 tolls aren't going to cut it. And when she's like talking about like hitting her, and there's like a really neat, like it's one of those like power level, just like straight statement moments where it's not just like the reader's understanding. It's like straight told you that she's harder than Diamond. She's able to increase her density and durability harder than Diamond. And when Kyoka's explaining her power, I looked into this. If somebody could correct me on this, if you know the movie Gone Girl, I don't know if that could just be a name, but like relatively all the powers in the verse have been named after movies. So I wonder if it's going to be those things where maybe it doesn't have to be directly named after a movie, it's what the person names it after, or something that is like in reminiscent of when you learn this power, what is something that you think of that, X, Y, or Z is what you name it after. So it's like if you really liked Harry Potter and you name it something after, the Half-Blood Prince, and it's just like, while I was training this, I watched this movie in my days in between, so it's like it's ingrained into my brain, so that right when I say it, it activates the power. One of those things where it's like your muscle memory is the reason that you name something as a technique, because it helps go into your ability to conjure it just based off of reflex and experience. But and she explains her power, and it just makes a big gong, because she says, Gorgon Maid says that she's like, oh, the sound of bell, where's it coming from? And so it means that the bell that we see behind Kyoka is not physically there, it's just part of the power. Maybe like she can see it, but other people can't. I mean, granted, she's wearing a veil, so maybe that goes into it. Like, maybe her eye cover literally is keeping it so she can't see. I assumed that was more of like a design power thing. Maybe another character will comment on it later, and it's literally just like, yeah, this girl doesn't see it because she has her eyes covered. I feel like it's just one of those power things where you can't see it, but she goes for 8 tolls instead, so double of the general power. I wonder what the stacking, like 8 is double, or every single time that you add one, it's like a stage kind of thing. So it's like you have, you have to the 4th power and then 10 to the 8th power kind of thing, or anything like that. I just wonder, or maybe it's like, 1 toll is 25%, 2 tolls is 35%, 4 tolls is 60%, and it just kind of like goes up in chunks every time, to where it doesn't go linearly, but every time that you go up 1, it's just it's a significant step that's bigger than the last, even on the output of it. But as it were, you have like, she's like, okay, all right, I got a thing for you. She pulls out like her special eye, and this was the thing, I figured this was going to be instantly with the move that defeats her, because when you have a backstory like this, it's like, oh, I'm going to show you your nightmare, your biggest fear. If it's one of those characters who have experienced this and have lived through it, and again, clearly she has, and she made it out the other side, these types of powers only end up strengthening these guys, because it's like you're just reminding them of something that they probably think of all the time, and that they, it never goes away. And it's like, yeah, how are you supposed to make me experience something worse than something that I've already had happen to me, and I've already, dusted myself off? It still hurts, but at the same time, it's like I'm able to kind of handle it and keep going. Because you see, like, she has this whole backstory, and she's like, okay, everyone that I've ever loved ends up dying, and these exorcists around me fall in battle, and she gave up on ever finding a husband, and in the process of it, she ended up finding a guy that was not an exorcist, that doesn't know she's an exorcist, and she's like, okay, well, I'll just kind of like keep this as something normal. And I feel like that's a little rough, because like when you have demons, like say like Mukurojima, that clearly has an affinity, a fascination with Sakaki, all it would have taken is one of them to monitor her and to know when she's weak and to know where to strike. But at the same time, I feel like one of these events is bad for the demons, because when you take somebody like her that's already really powerful, and I mean, personally for me, like, the worst scenario that you could have gotten out of this for the demons is that she has a bunch of children that are just like, take her, innate talents, and so instead of one of her, it's like maybe she has like, multiple sons and daughters that are like, okay, well, we just kind of fucked herself on this one. But, that's obviously just going into the idea if they continue off of where she was at. But if she was thinking about marrying some guy and going to live a normal life, you probably could have just let her do that, and it would have taken a cross paladin off the board, or captured him later and then used him as leverage against her. Granted, these are demons, like, maybe these weren't even like really intelligent demons that were really, trying to play a long game. But at the same time, it's like they thrashed her wedding, killed her fiance. You see Sakaki and Tsurugi at some point like going over there, and she's just like, even though he wasn't an exorcist and he wasn't strong or any powers, like, she still protected him. And this was the day that she ended up becoming a cross paladin. And it was like, she's like, essentially at this day, she's like, she had decided that solitude was the only thing that really was for her. Like, the only thing that she really can do is, like, she's one of those people, it's lonely at the top, but I have to stay that way for my own sake. Granted, I'm guessing that at some point in the future she'll find somebody. If she doesn't, maybe she'll be one of those characters. She'll win over Sakaki at some point, or she'll find somebody else. But I mean, like, it's one of those backstories that's very direct, and it's easy to understand because it plays into her job. Obviously, he's an exorcist. It plays into the demons being cruel creatures. We know that most of them are very violent, very vicious. But on top of that, it makes her seem really human because it's something that has nothing to do with the demons, has nothing to do with the job, her powers growing stronger, anything in her backstory. She's just like I just wanted to have a normal life and find somebody that loved me and kind of just go from there. And it's like when you have a moment like that, and then you have somebody that wanted to kind of retire, and then you pull them back in again. It just lights a different fire under them, because now I would imagine before, talking to her, she was one of those people that like always had that chip on her shoulder of like, do I want to keep getting strong? Because all it does is make it harder for me to find somebody. But now she's just like, well, if I can't have anybody, then strength is just all that I'm going to kind of take in, and then I'm just going to do my thing. And her thing is pulverizing demons in revenge. So I personally think the demons made a bad move with this. Because it's not like, because that's the thing. Her backstory is not like Kiyoshi's. I'm knocking stuff over. Her backstory is not like Kiyoshi's, where it happened when he was a little kid. She was already clearly, like, we don't know where she was at strength-wise, but I would assume that she was already pretty strong and pretty well off in her position. You don't get to see her chest, and I say that like, oh, you don't get to see her chest in the flashback. The only reason is because like you'd be able to tell if she already has her crest, and I assume that's her only one, because unlike everybody else, hers, the one that she used at least first, is on her chest. Maybe her arm ones are different if she's got arm ones. But we know that not everybody has two crests, like two different crests. It seems like having two of the same crest isn't the same level of difficulty. But when you have them now, it's just like she comes out of the nightmare. I didn't think it was gonna lock her, because it wasn't one of those things. Like another example is like you have if you read 100 Years Quest, what happened with Grey against Tokune, it was one of those illusions where it wasn't his own memory. It was like a collection and crafting of his memories and his wants and desires. So it was like, I wish this was real, but it's not, and I have to accept that. Where with Kyoka, she's just like, I've dealt with this before, and all you're doing is pissing me off bringing it up. Because like after that, she just goes like, they just go for full in. Gorgon just goes into her augmented form. She's like this giant diamond scale covered snake creature where she's sitting down the head like darts out on the Great Leviathan. And she just goes for a 16 toll, grabs her tiger, which turns into a sword, and she just goes right through him, cuts right through Gorgon, and then does this really cool like counter move to when she goes for like a last in, tries to get her, and she puts the sword behind her back and reflects her eyes, so it turns her into a doll, which is interesting because it turns her back into her base self or normal self as a doll. So I wonder if now they're going to have her as a hostage and be able to get some information out of her, which I think would be really cool, because now you have a direct way of getting lore and finding out stuff for the future. If after all that she's like, hey, just so you guys know, I still have this doll. Let's figure out what's going on for there. Because even if they undo this and you have relatively like the whole main cast squad just standing there when she turns back, she's going to fold. She's going to be like, if there was one of you, I would take the risk, but there's multiple of you. Because it's like you have 3 cross paladin level people. You have Kiyoshi, you have Hitsugi, you have Jack Joe, and I just realized this button on my key is like fell off and it's like wedged between. I'll get that later. But yeah, I rambled on a lot more in this chapters because there was a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about, and there was a lot just going on. Because like this was really cool to see her character just in general, because she was a very interesting new addition, and I don't know if we're gonna get any new crests. There was like that character really fast. There was that character that showed up right after Nihon's fight that I don't think is a demon unless it's demon rank 1. I'm guessing it's actually going to be an exorcist, because I feel like there's going to be at least one of those exorcists that's like doesn't look like an exorcist. He looks almost like a demon. He's way edgier. I have a feeling about it. But it's at a point now where I'm hoping we get like 1 or 2 more crests. If we don't get another crest, I'm hoping we get all of all of Sakaki's dice rolls in this arc, because I really want to start doing some I said Kiyoshi Kiyoshi content, but I've been waiting for a few specific things, like being able to talk about Crest a little bit more in depth. I think with just Jack Joe, Nihon, and then Sakaki and High Stakes, I can give a pretty fair explanation on how like the demon contracted powers work. But I wanted to wait a little bit more on the Crest, but with specifically Sakaki, I want to talk about his cool dice rolls and all his different weapons. Because we're 3, I believe, now. We've got his fan, we've got the cleaver, we've got the umbrella. And we should have 3 more, and then his instant with Death Splayer Blade and whatever an instant loss is. I'm so hoping so bad. This is the last thing I mentioned. I'm still hoping so bad that whatever the instant loss isn't just like he explodes and he passes out. I'm hoping it's like High Stakes goes feral, and so it's not the same way of like, oh yeah, I instantly just pass out. It's like I now have to fight for my life on top of not having any of my weapons. So like I can somehow direct this at you. It's like unleashing the Hulk. And he just, he's like, well, we're both kind of fucked, but I mean, like, I might be able to survive this. But anyway, other than that, solid chapter. I'm going to do what I can to do my best to keep up on my reviews and stuff as we go forward. I think it was a good spot to lag behind, if any, just because the last 2 chapters have been more, follow-up over events. And then, like, last chapter was part in just getting Sakaki, showing a little bit about Hitsugi and just some of his skills. And then this chapter, obviously, this was the primary stuff, just because this was like an actual character's backstory, getting a little bit more of her powers and closing out her fight. But anyway, other than that, comment below, tell me your thoughts are about this and what you think about like how the story is going so far, and hiccup there, and exactly what is your most interesting design and fight we've had this arc. So like from both sides, which character are you really liking? I really like Nihon and Jack Joe's form. I think it looks great. But other than that, I'll talk to you guys later.